Hello guys, Bogdan Bratis from Saspod.com here. Today I'm going to show you how you can distribute your podcast on Apple Podcasts. Apple is one of the biggest players in the podcasting space. 40% of the entire podcasting audience listens to podcasts via Apple Podcasts. It is specifically important that you list it there if your podcast is based in the US. A lot of people in the United States use Apple Podcasts, but not just the United States. People use Apple Podcasts all over the world. So Spotify is not the only player. Apple is another one, so it's important that you list it there. Looking back, it was a bit difficult to publish your podcast on iTunes or Apple Podcasts back in the days. But now it's quite easy. It's not as difficult as it seems. And today I'm going to show you how to do that with just a few steps using Saspod.com. Now, you can upload your podcast on Apple Podcasts directly as well. However, you will lose the possibility of actually distributing your podcast to other platforms such as Spotify, Deezer, Amazon Music, Podchaser, and so on. So using a hosting provider could be a better option for you. So today we're going to use Saspod.com. And to publish your podcast is quite simple. So first thing first, you have to create an account at Saspod.com. So go Saspod.com and then you go to register. Now I'm already logged in. So when I'll press register, I'll be prompted here with another account. So I already created one. You go through these steps, create the account, verify your account, and then you're going to be prompted with a welcoming message and a step-by-step guide on how to start a podcast. So in order to start a podcast, literally what you need to do in Saspod is to create a show. A show is basically your podcast that will contain all the episodes within that show. So looking at Saspod, we have here one show. It's called Turn Ideas into Sound. And we have 0 episodes at the moment. However, I created a show that's literally just a matter of pressing a button. You'll be prompted with the show editing page, which looks something like this. And then you'll need to fill in all the information about your show. So you'll have to do title, description, your author. Make sure that you include as much information as possible because Apple Podcasts requires certain categories in order for your podcast to be listed. So for example, the category is 100% important. So make sure that you have that selected there. At least one option is required. You can add up to 3 categories. Categories are very important because if you don't add the right category to your podcast may be included in the wrong category and you may not get the right audience for your podcast. The language is also very important. By default, it's selected to English. Then you have clean, or if your podcast is explicit, you may need to select this option. If it's explicit, it won't be banned from iTunes, but it will be banned if it's explicit and you don't list it as explicit. So it's important that you keep that in mind. Episodic or serial, this is basically an option where you can have the podcast in an episodic order, so that means there's no seasons, and then you have a serial order, that means there are seasons, season 1, episode 1 to 15, and then you have season 2, episode 1 to 20 or something like that. So these are very important for you to select. Then we have the description. It's important that we have a description in here. The limit in characters are about 700. So make sure that you fill this in. Usually this is very useful for SEO purposes, including certain keywords may be a good idea. This show is just a dummy show I created for this specific video. So I would advise that you fill in the entire field. And then you have the title. Again, title is very important. Make sure that you use an original title. Make sure that you don't infringe anyone's titles. So look for that as well. Make sure that it's not used because you don't want to get into legal problems down the road. It is important that you have an art cover. You can't publish your podcast without an art cover. The specifics of these are you needed to have it as a ratio of 1:1, so that would be a square art cover, and resolution needs to be between 1500 to 3000 pixels. Saspod will convert this for you, so if the art cover is not the right size, we will convert that for you, so you don't need to worry about that. And you can also recrop it if it's not square for whatever reason, so you can literally crop it like that, and then you can save it. So I already did that, so I don't need to do it again. And then these specific tabs are not required. They are just used for the public page inside Saspod. So it has nothing to do with the distribution, but it's important that you have it filled in so people can find your website, your Facebook, your Instagram, and so on. Media links, the same. This will start to get populated as you start distributing your podcast. So for example, we will have a specific link that goes to Apple Podcasts directly. So that's going to be listed here. And then we have the settings, which sometimes some players, iTunes doesn't require you to do that, but other players may need an RSS feed ownership verification. If that's the case, you can add here a token. That token will be embedded in the RSS feed. The RSS feed, I'm gonna get into it in a few seconds, but the RSS feed is a special page that podcast players are able to read from in order for your episode to be updated on these platforms. So you can include this email in here, and this way your RSS feed will be validated by that specific application, that specific player. So we're not gonna get into that at the moment, but just so you know that that's an option as well. So what you have to do after you completed all the show details, so your podcast details, the global details, what you have to do is get inside your show and create your first episode. If you don't create your first episode, iTunes will reject your podcast. You can't publish a podcast without an episode. So you need at least one piece of content in there in order for you to be eligible for Apple Podcasts. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna enter into the show, and then inside the show, we're gonna have the option to create a first episode. So you click on this button, quite simple. We can upload a file from here, or if we already uploaded a file in the past, we can select it from the media folder. So this is gonna go something like this. We're going to upload this file. It's going to take a few seconds because it's quite a short file. And by the way, you can do this with a trailer. So it doesn't need to be a full episode. You can have a small trailer. It could be about 1 minute to 2 minutes in length. And then you can basically publish that podcast on Apple. So while the file is processing, what we're going to do, we're going to have a title to this episode. So let's be very creative and call it a home for your podcast. And then in here, we're gonna need to add some description. So I'm just gonna add something generic. A home for your podcast is the best podcast in the world. Okay, so really, really cheesy. And then an episode number. What we wanna do, if this is a trailer, you can choose here a trailer and the episode number won't be relevant anymore. And then what you can do here is put the episode author. So this is a fake account, so we're gonna put Nick. And then tags are certain keywords that people may use to look for your podcast. However, these tags aren't sent to the RSS feed. They aren't sent to iTunes. They don't use them at all. So you don't need to necessarily include these if you hope to be discovered on iTunes, but this is important to be discovered on Google using the Saspod public page. So let's say, for example, we add something like podcasting, and another one could be education, let's say, right? So once that's done, you can choose to save it as unpublished. You can publish it directly or you can schedule it. However, if you want your podcast to be distributed on iTunes, it needs to be already published. A scheduled episode won't be integrated in the RSS feed. iTunes won't be able to see that you actually published an episode. So the episode needs to be published, needs to be live. So once you've done that, your podcast is still not distributed on iTunes. It is just uploaded on the Saspod platform. Now we're gonna need to set the distribution for this show and make sure that Apple Podcasts is looking into our RSS feed and constantly updates the listing on their side, right? So every time we're going to post an episode, that RSS feed is gonna be updated, and Apple Podcasts will be able to get that data from the RSS feed and update their listing, their directory on their side. So let's get into that. So what we have to do is go to the menu and then go to Distribute Show. Once you've done that, you'll have to go to Apple Podcasts. As you can see, there are many other platforms where you can distribute your podcast. That's the benefit of using a third-party host. And we're gonna do this with Apple Podcasts only today. So you click on Add Show. And you're going to be prompted with a step-by-step guide on how to actually distribute your podcast. So what you have to do is choose your show, then you're going to be presented with an RSS feed. This RSS feed, if we copy the link and then we paste it somewhere on the browser, you're going to see the RSS feed. This is how your RSS feed will look like. And this is the actual information that Apple will read your podcast from. So every time you post an episode, this RSS feed will be updated with a new episode and a new episode and so on. So this is the piece of information that we need to make sure that that gets to Apple and Apple has access to. Let's copy, like we said, this RSS feed, and it's important that you copy the right RSS feed. So make sure that you don't copy the RSS feed from Spotify, for example, because Saspod provides different RSS feeds for each and every player. So we don't want to, for example, copy the Spotify RSS feed and submit that to Apple. We don't want to do that. So let's do the Apple one. Copy, and then we have here a step-by-step process, but what we're going to do, we're going to just go to Apple Podcasts. So here, create a free account or login. So you go there. And then here, if you already have an Apple account, you will be able to easily get into Apple Podcasts by signing with your Apple account. However, if you don't have one, you'll need to create a new account. And after you create a new account, you'll need to make sure that you verify that account. And in order to verify that account with Apple, you will need to add a method of payment on that account. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. So you have to add that method of payment. You don't need to purchase anything, but you just need to add a credit card to it. And then you'll be able to use that account to submit your podcast. Now, I already have an account. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type my details, and then my password. And then you're gonna be prompted with a two-factor authentication. You can't get around this. This is meant to protect you from hackers. So usually you're gonna get this type of message. If you have an Apple device, you will get that two-factor authentication on your phone, let's say on your iPhone, on your MacBook Pro, on your computer. So make sure that you have one of those around in order to verify your account. I don't know exactly what happens if you don't have an actual Apple device. I think you can get the verification in another way, such as email or via text message. Let's get my information in there. Now that I'm logged into Apple Podcast Connect, what I have to do is to create a new show. I already created 3 shows. They are all dummy shows for demonstration purposes. If this is your first time entering into Apple Podcast Connect, you may be asked if your account is an individual or a business account, and a few more details. So just fill in those details as required, and then you're going to have access to the account. So to create a show, what you have to do is click on this plus button, and then what you have to do is create new show. And then here, you're going to choose add a show with an RSS feed. That's exactly what we want to do. Then we click next. And then here, we're going to paste in the RSS feed that we have from Saspod. Once that's done, you click add. And now your show will be ready for review. So these reviews can take maybe a few hours to a day to 5 days. It really depends. I've seen podcasts being accepted in less than an hour, and I've seen podcasts being accepted in 3 to 4 days. Fortunately, Saspod has a good interaction with Apple, and usually the review process is below 1 day. As you can see, we're still processing your show details. Check back later and then click publish. So this is exactly what you need to do. You need to check in later, see if your show still appears as draft, and if it appears as ready to publish, then you're going to get a publish button here. Once you get that, you'll be able to fill in a few more pieces of information, such as the recurrence of your podcast, a few other things, and then hit publish. Once you hit publish, your podcast will be available on Apple Podcasts within a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes to an hour. So if you need help to distribute your podcast on all these different platforms, just get in touch with me at saspod.com. There's gonna be a chat icon somewhere down in the right side of the website. Just click on that. Text me, and then I'm going to be able to assist you to start your Saspod account and then get your podcast out there on Apple Podcasts, and not just Apple Podcasts, on all these different platforms, and set your podcast for success. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.